To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Mask of Humility. Marcus May pushed his cleaning cart through the sterile hallways of Jefferson High School, the squeaking wheels echoing off the lockers. At 45, he appeared to be just another invisible maintenance worker, gray coveralls, worn boots, and calloused hands that suggested a lifetime of manual labor. But appearances, as he'd learned in 20 years of military intelligence, were the most powerful weapons of all. His wife, Kendra Morrison May, had been distant lately, coming home late from her job at the bank with weak excuses about overtime and client meetings. Their 15-year marriage had grown cold, but Marcus had been too focused on his current assignment to investigate. Sometimes the best intelligence officers missed what was happening in their own homes. His daughter Phyllis, 17 and sharp as her father, worked part-time in the school office. She was Marcus's pride, honor roll student, college-bound, everything he'd hoped she could become. When Tom Gentry, the principal and Marcus's father-in-law, had offered her the office job, it seemed like family looking out for family. Marcus had been working as Jefferson High's night janitor for 8 months now, part of a deep-cover operation investigating a teacher trafficking ring that the FBI had been unable to crack. His security firm, Phantom Investigations, specialized in cases that required absolute discretion and unconventional methods. The school board had hired him personally after 3 students had disappeared over 2 years, but only Marcus knew his true identity. Tom Gentry was a different story entirely. At 58, the principal ruled Jefferson High like his personal kingdom. Tall, silver-haired, and commanding, Tom had married Marcus's mother-in-law when Kendra was 12, becoming the only father figure she'd known after her biological father abandoned them. Tom's influence over Kendra had always bothered Marcus, but he'd tolerated it for family harmony. That tolerance was about to end. As Marcus mopped the administrative hallway, he noticed Clay Barker, the 35-year-old English teacher, leaving Tom's office with a smug expression. Clay was everything Marcus pretended not to be: tall, conventionally handsome, with the kind of charm that made parents trust him with their children. He taught advanced placement classes and coached the debate team, giving him access to the school's brightest students. "Working late again, janitor?" Clay's voice carried a condescending edge that made Marcus's jaw tighten. "Maybe you should focus more on actually cleaning instead of lurking around where you don't belong." Marcus looked up from his mop, letting his eyes show just enough confusion to maintain his cover. "Sorry, Mr. Barker. Just trying to do my job." Clay's laugh was cruel. "Your job is to clean up messes, not create them. Maybe you should remember that." The teacher's words carried weight that went beyond simple arrogance. Marcus filed the interaction away, adding it to the growing list of inconsistencies he'd noticed about Clay Barker. The man had expensive tastes for a teacher's salary, designer clothes, a new BMW, and a watch that cost more than most educators made in 3 months. Later that evening, Marcus finished his rounds and headed home to the modest 2-story house he'd bought in Kendra's name. The mortgage was deliberately structured to appear beyond a janitor's means, part of his cover story that he'd inherited a small insurance settlement. In reality, Phantom Investigations generated 7 figures annually, but only 3 people knew Marcus May and the company's CEO were the same person. Kendra was already in bed when he arrived, claiming a headache. She barely looked at him as he kissed her forehead, her perfume carrying a scent he didn't recognize, something expensive and definitely not what she'd worn that morning. "How was work?" she asked without genuine interest. "Same as always," Marcus replied, studying his wife's face in the dim bedroom light. Kendra was still beautiful at 42, with auburn hair and green eyes that had captured his heart during his final military assignment. But the woman lying before him felt like a stranger. "Tom mentioned Phyllis has been doing excellent work in the office," Kendra continued. "He's thinking about writing her a recommendation letter for college applications." Marcus nodded, but something cold settled in his stomach. Tom Gentry had been acting strangely around Phyllis lately. Too many private meetings, too much individual attention. Combined with his investigation into the trafficking ring, Marcus's protective instincts were screaming warnings. "That's good of him," Marcus said carefully. "Has Phyllis mentioned anything unusual about work?" Kendra's eyes flickered, just for a moment, but Marcus caught it. 20 years of reading enemy agents had taught him to recognize deception. Nothing unusual. Why would you ask that? No reason. Just want to make sure she's comfortable there. Kendra rolled over, ending the conversation. I'm sure she's fine. Tom knows what he's doing. As his wife's breathing settled into sleep, Marcus stared at the ceiling. 3 relationships he'd trusted implicitly, his wife, his father-in-law, and his daughter's safety, were showing cracks. In his line of work, cracks became chasms quickly. He slipped out of bed and moved to his home office, a converted basement room that Kendra rarely visited. Behind a false wall, Marcus accessed his real workspace, multiple monitors, encrypted communication equipment, and files that would make most people question everything they thought they knew about suburban life. A quick check of his surveillance equipment showed 2 missed calls from Danny Rice, his second-in-command at Phantom Investigations. Danny had been Marcus's communications specialist in the military and now served as the public face of their company. The return call was answered immediately. "We've got a problem." Danny's voice was tense. "The surveillance on Jefferson High picked up something tonight. Clay Barker met with 3 men in the parking lot after hours. We couldn't get clear audio, but one of them matched the description of Vincent Torres, known trafficker who's been on our watch list." Marcus felt ice form in his veins. "Send me everything." "And Danny? Start a full background check on Barker. I want to know every detail of his life going back to elementary school." "Already started." "But Marcus, there's something else. The meeting wasn't random. Barker was expecting them. He knew exactly when and where to be." "How long have you been watching him?" 2 weeks. But here's the thing. He's been staying late at school almost every night, always in the same classroom. We think he's using it as a staging area." Marcus closed his eyes, pieces of a horrifying puzzle beginning to align. "What classroom?" "Room 237. According to the school directory, that's where he holds his special tutoring sessions for select students. The same classroom where Phyllis had mentioned staying late to help with filing projects. The same classroom Tom Gentry had specifically recommended she assist with. "I want 24-hour surveillance on Barker starting tomorrow," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "And get me everything on Tom Gentry, financial records, travel history, communication logs. Everything." "You think the principal's involved?" Marcus thought about Tom's smug confidence, his control over school policies, his access to student records and schedules. "I think we're about to discover just how deep this goes." After ending the call, Marcus sat in the darkness of his hidden office. For 8 months, he'd been hunting predators who used their positions of trust to destroy young lives. He'd never imagined the hunt would lead to his own family's doorstep. But if Tom Gentry and Clay Barker thought they could use his daughter as a pawn in their sick game, they were about to learn that some janitors cleaned up more than just spilled coffee and broken glass. They were about to meet the real Marcus May. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. The next morning brought autumn's first real chill to Jefferson High, and Marcus arrived early for his shift. His supervisor, Lewis Ingram, barely looked up from his coffee as Marcus signed in. "You're here early again, May. Getting a little too eager for a minimum wage job, don't you think?" Marcus shrugged, playing his role. "Just want to do good work, Mr. Ingram. Maybe earn a raise someday." Lewis snorted. "Raises are for people with ambition. Janitors like you are lucky to have steady work." If Lewis only knew that Marcus's ambition had led him to uncover corruption rings in 3 countries and accumulate enough wealth to buy the entire school district twice over. But humility was Marcus's greatest weapon. Let them underestimate him while he gathered intelligence. His first stop was room 237, Clay Barker's classroom. Marcus had legitimate reasons to be there. The trash needed emptying and the floors required cleaning. But as he worked, his trained eyes cataloged details that would escape most observers. The room felt wrong. The desks were arranged to create blind spots from the hallway windows. A filing cabinet in the corner had scratches around the lock consistent with frequent opening. Most telling, the air carried a faint chemical scent that didn't belong in an English classroom. Something medicinal, possibly sedative. "You're thorough, I'll give you that." Marcus spun to find Clay Barker watching him from the doorway. The teacher's smile was predatory, his eyes calculating. "Mr. Barker, I didn't hear you come in." "I'm sure you didn't." Clay stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "You know, Marcus, it is Marcus, right? I've been watching you work. You're very observant for a janitor." The use of his first name was intentional, a power play designed to establish dominance. Marcus kept his expression neutral while his mind raced. How much did Clay suspect? Just trying to do a good job, sir. I'm sure you are. Clay moved closer, his presence deliberately intimidating. Tell me, how's your daughter Phyllis? She's been such a help with my after-school projects. Every instinct Marcus possessed screamed danger. She enjoys helping out. Says you're a good teacher. I try to give special attention to students with potential. Clay's smile grew wider. Phyllis has tremendous potential. I'd hate to see anything interfere with her development. The threat was subtle but clear. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, a cold, controlled fury that had once made him legendary among his military peers. But he forced his voice to remain steady. I'm sure she appreciates the guidance. I'm sure she does. Clay opened the filing cabinet, his back to Marcus. You know, the school board has been discussing budget cuts. Maintenance positions are always the first to go during tough times. I understand, sir. Do you? Clay turned back around, holding a thick folder. Because I'd hate to see hardworking family men lose their jobs over misunderstandings. Marcus noticed the folder's label, Special Students, Confidential. His daughter's name was visible on one of the tabs inside. I don't misunderstand much, Mr. Barker. Something shifted in Clay's expression, a flicker of uncertainty that suggested Marcus's tone had been sharper than intended. But the teacher recovered quickly. Good. Then we understand each other perfectly. Clay moved to his desk, placing the folder in a locked drawer. I'll see you around, Marcus. Give my regards to Phyllis. After Clay left, Marcus continued cleaning while his mind processed the encounter. The teacher knew his identity was questionable, that much was clear. But did he know about phantom investigations? Or did he simply suspect Marcus was more than he appeared? More importantly, the folder suggested Clay was documenting his interactions with specific students, including Phyllis. That level of organization indicated a systematic operation, not random opportunism. Marcus finished the classroom and moved through his regular route, but his attention kept returning to the administrative offices. Tom Gentry's door was closed, but voices carried through the thick wood. Two men speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Can't afford any complications right now. New shipment arrives Thursday. Make sure the girl doesn't. The conversation stopped abruptly as footsteps approached the door. Marcus quickly resumed mopping, his back to the office as Tom emerged with a man he didn't recognize, mid-40s, expensive suit, and the kind of watchful eyes that suggested professional paranoia. Marcus, Tom's voice carried forced cheerfulness. Working hard as always, I see. Yes, sir, Mr. Gentry. The stranger studied Marcus with obvious suspicion. This is your son-in-law? The janitor. Tom's laugh was condescending. That's right. Marcus here keeps our halls spotless. Don't you, Marcus? I do my best, sir. I'm sure you do. The stranger's gaze lingered on Marcus's hands. Hands that, despite months of maintenance work, still showed the calluses and scars of a different life. Tom tells me your daughter works here too. Part-time in the office. She's a good student. I'm sure she is. The man's smile was cold. Tom has excellent judgment about young people. Always has. After the stranger left, Tom lingered in his doorway. Marcus, I hope you're not getting too comfortable here. Budget constraints might force some difficult decisions soon. Another threat, this one from family. Marcus met his father-in-law's gaze directly. I'm grateful for the opportunity, Tom. I hope I can continue serving the school's needs. We'll see. Tom's expression hardened. By the way, I've asked Phyllis to stay late tomorrow night. Special project that requires her particular skills. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Tomorrow was Thursday, the same day the conversation had mentioned a shipment. His daughter was being positioned for something, and Tom was orchestrating it. I'm sure she'll do whatever you ask. She always does. Good girl, that one. Very cooperative. Marcus forced himself to turn away before his expression revealed the murderous thoughts racing through his mind. As he pushed his cart down the hallway, one thought echoed with crystal clarity. Tomorrow night, the janitor's mask would come off. The rest of his shift passed in mechanical routine, but Marcus's mind was planning. By the time he reached home, he had a preliminary strategy forming, one that would require every skill he'd learned in 2 decades of eliminating threats to innocent people. Kendra was in the kitchen when he arrived, preparing dinner with unusual care. She'd changed from her bank clothes into a dress he'd bought her for their anniversary, the one she claimed was too fancy for everyday wear. You look beautiful, he said, meaning it despite everything else. Her smile seemed genuine for the first time in weeks. I thought we could have a nice evening together. It's been too long since we really talked. During dinner, Kendra was attentive and engaging, asking about his day and sharing stories from the bank. It felt like the early years of their marriage, when conversation flowed naturally and silences were comfortable rather than tense. But Marcus's trained instincts recognized the performance. Kendra was working too hard, being too perfect, the same way targets acted when they suspected surveillance. How's Phyllis doing at school? He asked casually. Wonderful. Tom says she's his best student assistant ever. So mature and responsible. She mentioned staying late tomorrow for a special project. Kendra's fork paused halfway to her mouth, just for a moment. Did she? I'm sure it's something important. Tom doesn't ask for help unless it's really needed. I'm sure. Marcus reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Kendra, is everything all right? You seem different lately. Her eyes filled with tears, real ones, unless she'd become an exceptional actress. I've just been thinking about us, about our family. Sometimes I wonder if we've grown apart. Have we? I don't know. Maybe. But tonight feels like how things used to be. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. I love you, Kendra. Whatever's happening, whatever problems we're facing, we can work through them. The tears spilled over then, and for a moment, Marcus saw the woman he'd married. Vulnerable, conflicted, caught between loyalties she couldn't reconcile. I love you too, she whispered. I hope you can forgive me for not being the wife you deserve. The words carried weight that went beyond general marital dissatisfaction. Kendra was confessing something without naming it, seeking absolution for sins she couldn't voice. We all make mistakes, Marcus said carefully. The question is whether we learn from them. What if the mistakes are too big to fix? Then we deal with the consequences and move forward. Kendra nodded, wiping her eyes. I hope you mean that. Later that night, as Kendra slept beside him, Marcus made a series of encrypted calls. By morning, every aspect of Thursday's operation would be in place. Danny Rice would coordinate external surveillance. Rich Davenport, their technology specialist, would handle electronic countermeasures. And Marcus himself would be exactly where he needed to be when the trap was sprung. But first, he had one more conversation to arrange. At 2 a.m., Marcus slipped out of the house and drove to an all-night diner 20 miles away. The man waiting in the corner booth looked like a retired accountant, balding, soft around the middle, with thick glasses and forgettable features. Only someone with Marcus's background would recognize Saul McDonald as one of the most dangerous men in the private intelligence community. This better be important, Marcus. I was enjoying my retirement. I need a favor, Saul. A big one. They always are with you. Saul sipped his coffee, studying Marcus's face. What's the target? My family. Saul's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted slightly, the way a predator adjusts when prey becomes suddenly interesting. That's either very personal or very professional. Both. Marcus slid a thick envelope across the table. Everything I've gathered so far. I need clean backup tomorrow night, and I need it done in a way that leaves no traces back to phantom investigations. What kind of backup? The permanent kind. Saul opened the envelope, scanning the documents quickly. His eyebrows rose as he processed the information. A trafficking ring using a high school as cover. Your father-in-law as the inside facilitator. And your daughter as the next target. He looked up at Marcus. This is going to get messy. I'm counting on it. What about your wife? The intel suggests she's compromised. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Kendra made her choice. Now she'll live with the consequences. Or not live with them. That depends on how deeply she's involved. Saul closed the envelope. You know this changes everything. Once we move against family, there's no going back. There's already no going back. The question is whether I control what happens next, or whether I let others destroy what's left of my life. Fair enough. Saul stood, pocketing the envelope. I'll have a team in position by tomorrow evening. But Marcus, when this is over, you're going to owe me more than money. I understand. Do you? Because what you're asking me to do will make you a very different man than the one sitting here tonight. Marcus met his old friend's gaze steadily. That man died the moment he learned his family was feeding his daughter to monsters. What's left is just a janitor with very specific cleaning skills. Saul smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Then let's see how well you clean up this mess. As Marcus drove home through the empty streets, he felt the last traces of his old life falling away. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin in earnest. And when it was over, the people who'd betrayed his trust would discover that some stains never come out, no matter how hard you scrub. Chapter 3. The Daughter's Dilemma. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that made everything look washed out and lifeless. Marcus went through his usual routine, breakfast with Kendra, who seemed nervous and distracted, checking his equipment in the hidden basement office, and arriving at Jefferson High precisely on time. But today, he carried more than cleaning supplies. Concealed within his janitor's cart were surveillance devices that would make the NSA jealous, along with items that weren't legal in any jurisdiction but were nonetheless essential for the evening's work. His first priority was Phyllis. At 17, she was smart enough to sense danger but young enough to trust the adults in her life. Marcus needed to determine exactly what she knew and how much danger she was actually in. He found her in the main office during her free period, filing student records under the supervision of Evelyn Lucas, the vice principal. Phyllis looked up as Marcus entered to empty the waste baskets, her smile automatic and genuine. "Hi, Dad. Early today. Trying to stay ahead of the mess." Marcus worked methodically, listening to the office dynamics. Evelyn was on the phone with someone about Thursday evening arrangements, speaking in careful euphemisms that suggested a very different conversation than her official tone implied. "Phyllis, honey," Evelyn said after ending her call, "Mr. Gentry wants to see you in his office when you're finished with that filing." Marcus noticed his daughter's slight hesitation, barely perceptible, but there. "Did he say what about?" "Just something about tonight's special project. You know how particular he is about the details." After Evelyn left, Marcus moved closer to his daughter. "Phyllis, can we talk privately for a minute?" She looked around the empty office. "What's wrong? You seem tense." "I'm worried about you working late tonight. Has anyone told you exactly what this special project involves?" "Not really. Mr. Gentry just said it was important filing that required absolute discretion. Something about student records that needed to be reorganized before a district audit." The lie was smooth and plausible, exactly the kind of cover story that would appeal to a responsible teenager. Marcus felt his anger toward Tom reaching dangerous levels. "Has Mr. Barker been involved in any of these projects?" Phyllis's expression shifted slightly. "Sometimes. Why are you asking all these questions?" "Because I love you, and something doesn't feel right about tonight." "Dad, you're being paranoid. Mr. Gentry is family, and Mr. Barker is a good teacher. They wouldn't ask me to do anything inappropriate." The trust in her voice was heartbreaking. At 17, Phyllis still believed that titles and family relationships were guarantees of safety. Marcus had seen too much of the world to share that innocence. "I want you to promise me something," he said quietly. "If anything tonight feels wrong, anything at all, you leave immediately and call me. No matter what anyone tells you about being rude or unprofessional." "Dad, you're scaring me." "Good. Being a little scared will keep you safe." Phyllis studied her father's face with the same analytical intelligence she'd inherited from him. "There's something you're not telling me. There's a lot I'm not telling you. But promise me about tonight." "I promise." "But Dad, are we in some kind of trouble?" Marcus kissed her forehead. "Not if I can help it." The rest of the morning passed with Marcus positioning surveillance equipment throughout the school. Micro cameras went into ventilation grates, audio devices attached to the undersides of desks, and tracking beacons found their way into the personal belongings of several faculty members. By noon, he had clear intelligence on the evening's real agenda. The special filing project was scheduled to last until 8 p.m., well after normal school hours. Clay Barker would be present, along with 2 district officials whom Marcus recognized from his surveillance photos as known traffickers. Tom Gentry had arranged for all other staff to be gone by 6 p.m. Marcus's communication device buzzed with an encrypted message from Danny Rice. "External surveillance in position. Saul's team ready. Transport vehicle identified. Black panel van. License plate matches known trafficking network. Estimate 6 to 8 hostiles." The reply was simple. "Understood. Execute on my signal." At 3 p.m., Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He called Phyllis's phone with a message that would either save her or destroy their relationship forever. "Phyllis, this is Dad. I need you to listen very carefully and do exactly what I say." Chapter 4. The Web Unravels. The call to Phyllis lasted exactly 90 seconds, but it contained instructions that transformed her from an unknowing victim into an active participant in her own rescue. Marcus had trained enough operatives to recognize potential, and his daughter possessed the same analytical mind that had made him legendary in intelligence circles. "Dad, what you're asking me to do could get people in serious trouble. The people involved are already in serious trouble. The question is whether you're going to be one of them." After ending the call, Marcus received a text message that made his blood run cold. "Having dinner with Tom tonight to discuss the project. Should be educational. Love, K." Kendra wasn't just aware of the operation. She was actively participating. His wife had chosen her side, and it wasn't his. The afternoon dragged with mechanical routine. Marcus cleaned classrooms and emptied trash cans while his mind calculated angles of attack, escape routes, and the precise timing required to dismantle a human trafficking network without leaving any survivors to threaten his family in the future. At 5:30 p.m., as the last legitimate staff members departed, Marcus watched Tom Gentry's office through a concealed camera. His father-in-law was arranging files on his desk, not school documents, but photographs and personal information about students. The selection criteria were chillingly obvious: young, isolated, from troubled families or single-parent homes. Phyllis's file was prominently displayed. At 5:45, Clay Barker arrived with two men Marcus recognized from federal watch lists. Vincent Torres, the suspected trafficker Danny had identified, was accompanied by someone new. A thin, nervous man with the kind of desperate energy that suggested he was either very new to the business or very close to being eliminated from it. Marcus activated his encrypted communicator. "All units, this is Control. Target acquisition confirmed. Begin Phase 1. The response was immediate. Phase 1 initiated. External perimeter secured. Through his surveillance network, Marcus watched the predators gather in Tom's office. They were discussing logistics, transport schedules, payment methods, and the specific products that would be available for inspection that evening. "The girl is perfect," Torres was saying. "Young enough to train properly, old enough to be profitable immediately. And her father's connection to the school makes this entire operation bulletproof." "Marcus won't be a problem," Tom replied confidently. "He's too stupid to see what's happening and too dependent on this job to ask inconvenient questions." Clay laughed. "Even if he did figure it out, who's going to believe a janitor over a principal and an award-winning teacher?" "What about the wife?" the nervous man asked. "Kendra's been very helpful in keeping Marcus distracted. She understands the consequences of causing problems." Marcus felt something cold and final settle in his chest. The conversation confirmed his worst fears about Kendra's involvement while revealing the full scope of the betrayal. His wife hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been actively facilitating his daughter's victimization. At 6:15, Phyllis arrived for her special project. Marcus watched through hidden cameras as Tom greeted her with false warmth, explaining that they'd be working in Clay's classroom for better organization. "Where are the files we're supposed to organize?" she asked as they entered room 237. "Mr. Barker will bring them shortly. For now, why don't you have some water? It's been a long day." Tom handed her a bottle that Marcus recognized as similar to ones he'd seen Clay preparing earlier. The liquid inside was slightly cloudy, a detail that would escape most observers but set off every alarm in Marcus's experienced mind. "Actually, I'm not thirsty right now," Phyllis said, setting the bottle aside. "Should I start setting up the filing system?" Tom's expression tightened slightly. "The water will help you stay focused. It's important to stay hydrated during detailed work. I'll drink it later. Where would you like me to start with the filing?" Marcus felt pride and terror in equal measure. His daughter was following his instructions perfectly, polite but evasive, buying time while avoiding any substances they offered. At 6:30, Clay arrived with the other two men. The dynamic in the room shifted immediately as Phyllis realized this wasn't a normal school project. "Mr. Gentry, I don't think I'm supposed to be here during a faculty meeting." "You're exactly where you're supposed to be," Clay replied, his voice losing all pretense of professional courtesy. "In fact, you're the reason we're all here." The nervous man moved to block the door, while Torres approached with a confidence that spoke of extensive experience in these situations. "Phyllis," Tom said, his grandfather mask finally slipping away, "it's time you learned about your real value to this family. Marcus's hand moved to his communicator. All units, execute Phase 2. Targets are active. Repeat, targets are active. But before he could move, his daughter did something that proved she was definitely his child. You know what's interesting about modern technology? Phyllis said conversationally, reaching into her backpack. My father taught me that the most important thing about any situation is having better information than the other people involved. She pulled out a device that looked like a student calculator, but was actually a military-grade panic beacon Marcus had given her 3 years earlier. For instance, did you know that this entire conversation has been broadcast live to the FBI field office in Richmond? Or that there are federal agents positioned at every exit of this building? The silence that followed was deafening. Torres was the first to react, lunging toward Phyllis with practiced violence. He never reached her. Marcus came through the classroom window in an explosion of glass and contained fury. 20 years of lethal training focused on a single objective, protecting his daughter from the monsters who tried to destroy her innocence. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, Torres was unconscious. The nervous man was handcuffed to a desk, and Clay Barker was learning that English teachers weren't trained for close-quarters combat with former Special Forces operators. Tom Gentry stood in the corner, his face white with shock and sudden understanding. You're not really a janitor. Marcus looked at his father-in-law with eyes that held no warmth, no forgiveness, and no mercy. No, Tom, I'm not. Chapter 5, The Principal's Fall. The aftermath of violence always carried a strange quality of time, moments that stretched like hours while adrenaline processed and reality reasserted itself. Marcus stood in the destroyed classroom, his daughter safe behind him, while Tom Gentry finally understood that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. Phyllis, are you hurt? Marcus asked without taking his eyes off the remaining threats. I'm okay, Dad. The FBI agents you mentioned are actually my team, not federal agents. We needed them to believe they were caught in a federal operation rather than a private one. Danny Rice and Rich Davenport entered through the broken window, dressed in tactical gear that suggested serious government authority. To outside observers, they were exactly what Phyllis had claimed, federal agents executing a planned operation. Building secured, Danny reported. 3 additional vehicles intercepted attempting to leave the premises. We have a total of 8 suspects in custody. Tom found his voice, though it shook with fear and growing rage. You can't do this. I'm a school principal. I have rights. I have connections. Marcus turned to face his father-in-law fully. You have the right to remain silent. Everything else depends on how cooperative you decide to be. Cooperative? You just destroyed my office, attacked my associates, and terrorized a minor. When the real authorities arrive. The real authorities won't be coming, Rich interrupted, displaying a set of credentials that looked absolutely authentic. This is a federal operation investigating interstate trafficking. Local law enforcement has been instructed to maintain perimeter security only. The beauty of Marcus's cover story was its simplicity. Federal agencies did operate with extreme discretion, they did coordinate with private security firms, and they absolutely did prioritize protecting ongoing investigations over local protocol. I want to see warrants, Tom demanded. I want to call my lawyer. You can call anyone you like, Marcus said calmly. But first, you're going to answer some questions about your operation. What operation? This is all a misunderstanding. We were conducting legitimate school business. Marcus gestured toward the unconscious Torres. Vincent Torres has been under federal surveillance for 18 months. His presence here, along with the drugged water bottle and your discussion of products and profitability, suggests this goes well beyond school business. Tom's confidence was cracking visibly. I don't know what you think you heard. We heard everything. Every conversation, every plan, every discussion of how my daughter would be perfect for training. Marcus's voice carried a lethal calm that made everyone in the room step back slightly. The question isn't what we know. The question is what you're going to do to minimize the consequences. Phyllis was watching the interrogation with fascination and growing understanding. Dad, when you said you weren't really a janitor, what exactly do you do? I solve problems that other people can't handle. Marcus replied without breaking eye contact with Tom. And right now, I'm solving a very big problem. Tom was sweating despite the cool evening air. If this is really federal, then I want to make a deal. I have information about the network, names, locations, financial records. Start talking. Not here. Not with witnesses. I need guarantees about immunity, witness protection. Marcus smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Tom, you seem to be misunderstanding the situation. This isn't a negotiation. This is you explaining why my team shouldn't turn you over to Vincent Torres's competitors after they learn you've been caught. The color drained from Tom's face. You can't. That's murder. That's business. The trafficking network doesn't forgive people who compromise operations. They certainly don't forgive people who get federal attention drawn to their activities. I'll tell you everything. Names, dates, financial accounts. The whole network. In exchange for what? Protection. A new identity. Enough money to disappear properly. Marcus studied his father-in-law with cold calculation. That depends on how valuable your information proves to be, and how honest you are about your involvement with my family. Your family. Kendra. How long has she been helping you? Tom's silence stretched until Rich made a show of checking his watch. We should probably get moving. Torres's people will be expecting a check-in soon. 6 months, Tom said quickly. Kendra's been helping for 6 months. But she didn't know about the trafficking. She thought it was just other things. What other things? Financial irregularities. Moving money through the school's accounts. She works at First National. She has access to banking systems that made the money laundering easier. Marcus felt another piece of his world crumble. Kendra wasn't just aware of illegal activities. She was an active participant in financial crimes that funded human trafficking. And tonight? What was her role tonight? She was supposed to keep you distracted. Make sure you didn't come to the school or ask questions about Phyllis working late. By having dinner with you. By. Tom hesitated, then seemed to realize that partial truth would be more dangerous than complete honesty. By sleeping with Clay. She's been doing that for 3 months now. He convinced her it was necessary to keep the financial operation secret. The words hit Marcus like physical blows, but his expression never changed. 20 years of intelligence work had taught him to compartmentalize emotional pain until it could be processed safely. Phyllis gasped. Mom's been cheating? Your mother made choices, Marcus said quietly. Bad choices that put you in danger. Danny's radio crackled with an encrypted message that only Marcus would understand. Subject K is en route to the school. ETA 10 minutes. Kendra was coming, probably expecting to find her daughter drugged and helpless, ready for transport to hell. Change of plans, Marcus announced. Tom, you're going to call Kendra and tell her the project is running late, but everything is going according to plan. I won't. Rich moved with casual efficiency, pressing a device against Tom's neck that delivered a precisely calibrated electrical shock. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but more than enough to demonstrate serious intent. You misunderstood, Marcus said as Tom recovered. That wasn't a request. Tom made the call with shaking hands, delivering exactly the message Marcus had dictated. To anyone listening, it would sound like confirmation that Phyllis was secure and the operation was proceeding normally. Excellent. Now we wait for my wife to arrive. Dad, Phyllis said softly. What's going to happen to Mom? Marcus looked at his daughter, brave, intelligent, and still innocent enough to hope that family betrayals could be forgiven and forgotten. That depends entirely on what your mother does when she gets here. But Marcus already knew what Kendra would do. She would arrive expecting to find her daughter defeated and helpless. She would see the destruction and realize the operation had failed. And then she would make the final choice that determined whether she lived through the night or joined the other casualties of her betrayal. Outside, car headlights swept across the parking lot as Kendra Morrison-May drove toward a reckoning she couldn't possibly imagine. Marcus checked his watch and activated his communicator one final time. Saul, this is Control. Execute Phase 3. Target is approaching. Copy that. Phase 3 initiated. The final act was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Wife's Betrayal. Kendra's BMW pulled into the school parking lot at exactly 8:17 p.m., her headlights cutting through the October darkness. Marcus watched through the surveillance system as his wife sat in her car for several minutes, checking her appearance in the rearview mirror and taking deep breaths that suggested she was preparing for something difficult. She was dressed for seduction, the black dress he'd bought her for their anniversary, jewelry that caught the light, perfume that would linger in the air long after she left. Every detail calculated to appeal to Clay Barker's ego and ensure his cooperation in whatever came next. She looks beautiful, Phyllis said quietly, watching the same feed. Your mother has always been beautiful, Marcus replied. That was never the problem. Through his earpiece, Saul's voice was calm and professional. Subject is moving toward the building. She's carrying a small overnight bag and appears to be expecting to stay for an extended period. The bag was interesting. It suggested Kendra believed tonight would be more than a simple distraction, that she was planning to be with Clay long enough to require a change of clothes. Or perhaps she was planning to disappear entirely once the operation was complete. Tom, Marcus said without turning around, when Kendra arrives, you're going to tell her exactly what she expects to hear. The operation succeeded, Phyllis has been secured, and everything is ready for the next phase. And if I refuse? Rich held up a small device that looked like a smartphone, but was actually a remote detonator. Then we find out how well this classroom survives a controlled explosion with you inside it. Tom's face went white. You're bluffing. Federal agents don't. We're not federal agents, Danny said cheerfully. We're private contractors working outside normal legal constraints. Our job is to solve problems permanently, not arrest people and hope they stay arrested. The psychological pressure was deliberate and effective. Tom was beginning to understand that his situation was far worse than a federal investigation. He was dealing with people who had no legal limitations on their methods or their goals. Marcus's earpiece crackled again. Subject has entered the building. She's moving directly toward the administrative wing, suggesting familiarity with the layout during after-hours periods. Positions, everyone. Tom, remember, convince her that everything went according to plan. They could hear Kendra's heels clicking on the hallway tiles as she approached. When she knocked on the classroom door, the sound was confident and eager. Tom? Clay? How did everything go? Tom looked at Marcus, who nodded once. Come in, Kendra. We need to talk. Kendra entered the classroom and immediately froze. The broken window, overturned desks, and unconscious figures on the floor painted a picture of catastrophic failure. But it was the sight of her husband and daughter, very much awake and unharmed, that made her face go white with shock. Marcus? Phyllis? What are you doing here? The better question, Marcus said calmly, is what you're doing here. Kendra's mind was clearly racing, trying to construct an explanation that would account for her presence while maintaining some semblance of innocence. Tom called me about an emergency at the school. He said there had been an accident and you might need help. Interesting story, Rich interrupted, consulting a tablet. But according to the phone records we've obtained, Tom called you at 7:30 with an update about the project running late. No mention of accidents or emergencies. Kendra's composure cracked slightly. I don't understand what's happening here. Who are these people? Why is everyone acting like I've done something wrong? Because you have done something wrong, Phyllis said, her voice carrying a pain that cut deeper than anger. You knew what they were planning to do to me, didn't you? Planning to do? Honey, I don't know what anyone's told you, but they told me everything, Mom. About the trafficking, about the money laundering, about you and Mr. Barker. The words hung in the air like poison gas, contaminating everything they touched. Kendra looked around the room desperately, seeking an ally or an escape route that didn't exist. Marcus, whatever you think you know, there's an explanation. There always is, Marcus replied. The question is whether it's true. I love you. I love our family. I would never do anything to hurt Phyllis. But you would drug her and hand her over to human traffickers? What? No. That's insane. I would never. Danny held up a recording device. Would you like to hear your conversation with Clay Barker from 2 nights ago? The one where you discussed the best way to ensure Phyllis would be cooperative during the transition. Kendra's face went from white to gray. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting my daughter from her own mother. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Kendra stumbled backward, her carefully constructed facade finally crumbling completely. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The threats. The promises. Clay said if I helped with this one operation, we could disappear together. Start fresh somewhere else. With the money you made selling my daughter. It wasn't supposed to happen to Phyllis. The plan was to use other students, troubled kids who wouldn't be missed. But then the opportunity arose, and Clay said it would be perfect cover because no one would suspect family involvement. The confession spilled out like water through a broken dam. Months of guilt, fear, and self-justification poured into the open, revealing the full scope of Kendra's betrayal. How many other students? Marcus asked, his voice deadly quiet. I don't know. 7. 8. I didn't ask for details. Their names. I can't remember. Rich moved toward her with the same casual efficiency he'd shown with Tom, but Marcus held up a hand. Phyllis, please wait in the hallway. Dad, now. His daughter left reluctantly, understanding that what came next wasn't something she should witness. The door closed behind her with the finality of a vault ceiling. Let me explain something to you, Kendra, Marcus said, moving closer to his wife. For 6 months, I've been hunting a trafficking ring that was using this school as a hunting ground. I've documented 8 missing students, tracked financial transactions totaling over $2 million, and identified a network that spans 4 states. Marcus, I'm not finished. For 6 months, I've been working to destroy the people responsible for turning children into commodities. And today I discovered that my own wife, the mother of my child, was not only aware of the operation but actively facilitating it. Kendra was crying now, but the tears looked more like fear than remorse. I didn't have a choice. They threatened to kill you if I didn't cooperate. They threatened to kill me? Clay said the organization had resources, connections, that if I refused to help, they would make both of us disappear. So you decided to sacrifice our daughter instead? I hoped, that when the time came, I could find a way to protect her. But the pressure kept building, and Clay kept pushing, and tonight was supposed to be the end of it. Marcus studied his wife's face, searching for any trace of the woman he'd married 15 years ago. But all he saw was a stranger who'd chosen convenience over family, self-preservation over her own child's safety. Do you love him? The question seemed to surprise her. Who? Clay. Yes. I thought I did. He made me feel important, valuable, like I was more than just a banker's wife married to a janitor. Except I'm not a janitor. I know that now, but I didn't know then, and Clay offered me a life that seemed bigger, more exciting, more profitable. Yes. The admission was barely a whisper. More profitable. Marcus turned away from her, speaking to the room in general. Tom, you mentioned wanting to make a deal. I'm prepared to offer one. What kind of deal? Complete testimony against the network. Names, locations, financial records, communication logs. Everything you know about every aspect of the operation. In exchange for a quick death instead of being turned over to Torres's competitors. The words were spoken so calmly that it took several seconds for their meaning to register. When it did, Tom began backing toward the corner of the room. You can't be serious. This is America. You can't just execute people. I can't, Marcus agreed. But my associates can. And will. Kendra, Tom said desperately. Tell him he's making a mistake. Tell him we can all work together to fix this. But Kendra was staring at her husband with growing horror and understanding. Marcus, what exactly do you do for a living? I eliminate threats to innocent people. Usually foreign threats, but occasionally domestic ones. You're an assassin. I'm a problem solver. And right now, you're all very big problems. Saul's voice crackled through Marcus's earpiece. External perimeter reports 3 vehicles approaching from the north. Unknown if they're law enforcement or hostile. Copy that. Prepare for extraction. Marcus looked at his wife one final time. Kendra, I'm going to give you a choice that's more generous than you gave our daughter. You can cooperate fully with the investigation, testify against everyone involved, and spend the rest of your life in federal prison. Or you can maintain your loyalty to Clay and the network, and spend the rest of your life, all 30 minutes of it, wishing you'd made a different choice. Those aren't real choices. They're the only choices you have left. Outside, the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. Whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of the trafficking network, but the future of what remained of Marcus's family. Tom was running out for everyone. Chapter 7. The network's response. The 3 vehicles approaching Jefferson High weren't law enforcement. Marcus confirmed that through his surveillance network as 6 heavily armed men deployed from the SUVs with military precision. These were Torres's associates, responding to his missed check-in with lethal intent. Danny, get Phyllis to the safe room in the basement. Now. Already moving, Danny replied, escorting Marcus's daughter through a hidden access panel that led to the school's old bomb shelter. A Cold War relic that Marcus had converted into a hardened position months ago. Saul, status report. 6 hostiles, professional-grade equipment, moving to surround the building. They're not here to negotiate. Marcus turned to his wife and father-in-law. both of whom had heard enough to understand their situation had just become infinitely worse. "Congratulations," he said coldly. "Your friends have arrived to clean up loose ends. Unfortunately for them, they don't know they're walking into a trap." Tom was hyperventilating. "They'll kill us all. These aren't people you negotiate with." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "They're people you eliminate." Rich was already moving, distributing weapons from the concealed arsenal Marcus had positioned throughout the school. Danny returned from securing Phyllis, carrying enough firepower to level a city block. "What about us?" Kendra asked, her voice barely steady. Marcus handed her a pistol. "If you want to live through the next hour, you'll do exactly what I tell you." "I don't know how to use this." "Then you'd better learn quickly." Through the surveillance system, Marcus watched the attackers position themselves at strategic entry points. They moved with the confidence of men who'd done this many times before, eliminated witnesses, destroyed evidence, and disappeared without leaving traces. Tonight would be different. "Tom, how many people in the network know about this location?" "I don't know." Clay handled most of the operational details. Marcus looked at Clay Barker, who was conscious but zip-tied to a desk chair. The English teacher's face was swollen from their earlier encounter, but his eyes were alert and calculating. "Feel like answering some questions, Clay?" "Go to hell." Rich approached with a device that looked like a medical scanner, but was actually a military-grade interrogation tool. "This can be easy or difficult. Your choice. You can't torture me. This is still America." "America ended for you the moment you decided to sell children," Marcus replied. "Now you're in my world, where different rules apply." The first explosion came from the north entrance, a breaching charge designed to create maximum shock and confusion. But Marcus had expected it, and his team was already in position. The firefight that followed was brief and one-sided. Torres's men were professionals, but they were fighting on Marcus's chosen ground against opponents who had spent decades perfecting the art of elimination. Within 10 minutes, it was over. 6 attackers had entered the building. None would be leaving. "Building secure," Saul reported through the radio. "No casualties on our side." Marcus turned back to Clay Barker, who was now looking significantly less confident. "As I was saying, you're going to answer some questions, starting with how many people know about tonight's operation." "The local cell was 12 people total," Clay said quickly. "Torres, the 2 guys with him, Tom, myself, Kendra, and 6 others who handle transport and logistics." "Names and locations." "I want immunity. Full federal protection. You want to stay alive for the next 5 minutes." "Names and locations." Clay provided a list that Danny recorded and immediately transmitted to other Phantom investigation teams positioned throughout the region. Within hours, the entire local network would be dismantled. "What about the regional organization?" Marcus continued. "I don't know the full structure. That's Torres's level, not mine." "Kendra," Marcus said without turning around. "Tell me about the money laundering operation." His wife was sitting in the corner, still holding the pistol with obvious unfamiliarity. "The bank accounts were set up over 18 months. Clay provided fake documentation for the shell companies, and I facilitated the transfers." "How much money? Total?" "Maybe $15 million. Most of it went to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland." "Account numbers?" "I have them memorized." Clay insisted on that for security. Marcus smiled grimly. "Excellent. Rich, start tracing those accounts. I want every dollar frozen or redirected to law enforcement victim assistance funds." "Already on it," Rich replied, his fingers flying across a specialized keyboard. "Swiss accounts are locked. Cayman accounts are interesting. They're connected to a much larger operation." "How much larger?" "Conservative estimate? We're looking at a $50 million operation spanning at least 8 states. This school was just one collection point in a massive network." The scope of the discovery was staggering. What Marcus had thought was a regional trafficking ring was actually part of a national operation that had been operating for years. "Tom, you mentioned having information about the larger network. Start talking." "The regional coordinator is someone called Vincent's boss. I never met him, but his name is Sergio Sheridan. He operates out of Atlanta and coordinates activities across the Southeast." "What else?" "There are similar operations in 12 other school districts. Principals, teachers, staff members, all recruited to identify and access vulnerable students." "Names?" "I have a contact list at home, hidden in my office safe." Marcus nodded to Danny, who immediately left to retrieve the information. The safe would be opened whether Tom provided the combination or not. Kendra, besides the banking, what other services did you provide? Student records. Clay needed access to files that showed family situations, psychological profiles, academic performance. I used my banking connections to access credit reports and financial information on parents. To identify the most vulnerable targets. Yes. The admission was delivered without emotion, as if discussing stock market transactions rather than the systematic predation of children. Marcus felt the last traces of love for his wife disappear completely. His communication device buzzed with an update from the teams pursuing the contact list. 7 locations hit simultaneously. 11 arrests. Substantial evidence recovered. This thing is bigger than we thought. Understood. Maintain operational security. We're not finished here. Marcus turned back to Clay Barker. You mentioned that tonight was supposed to be the end of something. The end of what? The school operation. We were moving to a new location, different state. Phyllis was going to be our final acquisition from Jefferson High. Why? Because someone in law enforcement was getting close. Not local, federal. Torres said we had maybe 2 weeks before the investigation reached us. Marcus felt ice form in his veins. If federal investigators were closing in on the network, his own operation could be compromised. Private contractors working outside legal boundaries didn't fare well when real federal agents arrived. How close were they? Close enough that Torres wanted to eliminate all local assets and witnesses. Including you? Clay's expression shifted to fear and realization. Including all of us. Tonight wasn't just about acquiring Phyllis, it was about cleaning house. The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. Torres hadn't just been targeting his daughter. He'd been planning to eliminate everyone involved in the school operation, including Tom, Clay, and Kendra. They'd all been marked for death, whether they knew it or not. So you were betraying people who were already planning to kill you. I didn't know. Torres never said anything about elimination. He just said we were relocating. Because professionals don't announce when they're planning to kill their assets. Saul's voice cut through the radio. Marcus, we've got a problem. Federal vehicles approaching from 3 directions. Real ones this time. ETA 6 minutes. The situation had just become exponentially more complex. Real federal agents were about to arrive at a crime scene containing multiple bodies, illegal weapons, and a private military operation that existed outside any legal framework. Marcus looked around the destroyed classroom one final time. In 6 minutes, his carefully constructed cover would be blown, his team would be arrested, and his daughter's safety would depend on federal protection that might or might not be effective against a $50 million criminal network. Unless he did something that would change everything forever. Kendra, Tom, Clay, you have exactly 5 minutes to decide which version of tonight's events you're going to tell the federal agents. What do you mean? Kendra asked. You can tell them the truth, that you were all complicit in a trafficking operation, that you helped drug and abduct children, and that you were planning to sell my daughter to the highest bidder. In which case, you'll spend the rest of your lives in federal prison, assuming the network doesn't kill you first. Or you can tell them that you discovered the trafficking operation, contacted my security firm for help, and cooperated in tonight's raid to save my daughter and gather evidence against the network. The choice was simple but profound. Truth meant certain imprisonment and possible death. Lies meant potential freedom but permanent dependence on Marcus's protection. What happens if we choose the second option? Tom asked. Then you become my assets for the rest of your lives. You do what I tell you, when I tell you, without question or hesitation. And if we refuse? Marcus smiled, and for the first time that night, it reached his eyes. Then you don't live long enough to tell the federal agents anything. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Tom was running out for everyone. Chapter 8, Federal Complications. The FBI vehicles formed a perimeter around Jefferson High with the precision of a military operation. Marcus watched through his surveillance system as agents deployed with tactical gear and the kind of grim efficiency that suggested this wasn't their first trafficking raid. Special Agent Regina Schaefer stepped out of the lead vehicle, a woman in her early 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Marcus recognized her from federal briefings. She was one of the Bureau's top experts on human trafficking networks, with a reputation for thoroughness that made criminals very nervous. Danny, status on the evidence preparation? Federal-grade documentation package complete. Financial records, communication logs, and physical evidence, all properly cataloged. It'll hold up under any scrutiny. The beauty of Marcus's team was their ability to construct convincing alternate narratives on short notice. By the time federal agents entered the building, they would find a private security operation that had uncovered and disrupted a major trafficking ring while gathering evidence that could dismantle the entire network. Rich, what's the status on our legal cover? Phantom Investigations has a federal contractor license for exactly this type of operation. All weapons and equipment are properly registered. Our presence here is completely legitimate. Marcus turned to his 3 prisoners. Last chance to make your decision. Federal agents will be inside this building in 3 minutes. Tom was the first to break. I'll cooperate. Full cooperation. Whatever you need. Clay hesitated longer, his teacher's analytical mind working through the implications. If I agree to this, what guarantees do I have? None, Marcus replied bluntly. But if you don't agree, your guarantee is a bullet in the back of the head before the agents reach this room. I'll cooperate. Kendra was staring at her husband with something approaching awe. You planned this entire thing, didn't you? The job at the school, the investigation, even tonight's operation. I planned to protect my daughter and destroy the people threatening her. Everything else was improvisation. And us? Were we always part of your plan? Marcus met her eyes directly. You stopped being part of any plan the moment you chose to help them drug our child. The words hit Kendra like physical blows, but she nodded with grim understanding. I'll do whatever you want. But Marcus, is there any chance, any possibility, that we could? No. The finality in his voice ended the conversation permanently. Whatever Marcus and Kendra had shared for 15 years was dead, killed by her choices and buried under the weight of tonight's revelations. Footsteps in the hallway announced the federal agent's arrival. Marcus quickly reviewed the cover story one final time. Phantom Investigations had been hired by concerned parents to investigate suspicious activities at Jefferson High. The investigation had uncovered a trafficking ring using the school as a hunting ground. Tonight's operation was a coordinated effort to rescue Phyllis while gathering evidence against the network. Federal agents. Identify yourselves. Marcus May, Phantom Investigations. Were the contractors who called this in. Special Agent Schaefer entered the classroom with her weapon drawn but not aimed, taking in the scene with professional assessment. Her eyes cataloged the broken window, overturned furniture, unconscious figures, and the 3 very nervous civilians sitting under guard. Mr. May, I need to see identification and your federal contractor credentials. Marcus provided both, along with a briefing document that Danny had prepared. Agent Schaefer, we've been investigating this network for 8 months. Tonight was our opportunity to gather evidence and prevent the abduction of my daughter. Your daughter was the target? Phyllis May, 17 years old. She was scheduled to be drugged and transported tonight as part of a trafficking operation run by school personnel. Schaefer studied the briefing document while her team secured the scene. This is quite an operation you've uncovered. How many suspects do we have? Immediate suspects include Principal Tom Gentry, Teacher Clay Barker, and approximately 6 additional network members. We've also identified financial crimes involving First National Bank. And the woman in the corner? Marcus felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Kendra Morrison May, my wife. She was unknowingly drawn into the financial aspects of the operation through her position at the bank. The lie came easily, part of the cover story they'd agreed upon. Kendra's eyes filled with tears, whether from gratitude or grief. Marcus couldn't tell. I'll need full statements from everyone involved, Schaefer said. But first, where's your daughter? Secure location within the building. I'll retrieve her. Marcus left the classroom and made his way to the basement shelter where Phyllis waited with one of Danny's operatives. His daughter looked up as he entered, her face showing the strain of the evening's events. Is it over? She asked. The immediate danger is over. But Phyllis, what happens next is going to change everything about our lives. What do you mean? The federal agents are here. They're going to want statements from everyone involved. You need to understand that some of what we tell them won't be completely true. You want me to lie to the FBI? I want you to survive. And survival sometimes requires telling stories that protect the people you love. Phyllis studied her father's face with the same analytical intelligence that had helped her survive the evening. What's the story? Your mother was tricked into helping with financial crimes. She didn't know about the trafficking, and she tried to protect you when she discovered the truth. But that's not what happened. No, but it's what needs to have happened if your mother is going to avoid spending the rest of her life in federal prison. Even after what she did. Even after what she did. Phyllis was quiet for a long moment. Why are you protecting her? I'm not protecting her. I'm protecting you from having to live with the knowledge that your mother helped plan your abduction. The distinction was subtle but important. Marcus wasn't forgiving Kendra's betrayal. He was managing its consequences to minimize the damage to his daughter's future. What about our family? What about you and Mom? There is no more you and Mom. Tonight ended that permanently. But if she cooperates with the cover story, then she lives long enough to disappear into federal protection, and you never have to see her again. Phyllis nodded slowly. And if she doesn't cooperate, then she doesn't live long enough for it to matter. They returned to the main building together, father and daughter walking side by side through hallways that would never feel safe again. Agent Schaefer was waiting with questions that would determine everyone's fate. The next few hours would test every skill Marcus had learned in 20 years of creating believable cover stories. But for the first time all evening, he felt confident about the outcome. The federal investigation would uncover a massive trafficking network. Dozens of arrests would be made, and millions of dollars in illegal assets would be seized. Clay Barker and Tom Gentry would spend decades in federal prison. The missing students would be found and returned to their families. And Marcus May would officially become a hero, a private investigator who'd risked everything to save his daughter and expose a nationwide criminal conspiracy. The truth was more complicated, but the truth had never been particularly useful in Marcus's line of work. What mattered was results. And tonight's results would protect his daughter while ensuring that everyone who'd threatened her would spend the rest of their lives paying for their mistakes. Justice, Marcus had learned long ago, was just another word for consequences delivered by people with the skills and resources to ensure those consequences were permanent. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months after the Jefferson High raid, Marcus stood in the conference room of Phantom Investigation's new headquarters, watching CNN's coverage of the final convictions in what the media had dubbed the school network scandal. 47 defendants across 8 states had been sentenced to a combined total of over 800 years in federal prison. Clay Barker had received life without parole. Tom Gentry had died in federal custody, officially from a heart attack, though Marcus knew the truth was more complex. Some debts could only be paid in blood. The Phantom Investigations team continues to receive commendations from federal law enforcement, the news anchor was saying. Their work has resulted in the rescue of over 60 missing children and the complete dismantling of one of the largest trafficking networks in American history. Marcus turned off the television and returned to his desk, where Danny Rice was waiting with the monthly operational report. Interesting case from Atlanta, Danny said, sliding a file across the desk. Missing persons case that has some familiar patterns. Marcus opened the file and immediately recognized the organizational structure he'd seen before. Sergio Sheridan? That's our assessment. Looks like he's rebuilt operations using a different model, corporate recruiting instead of schools. Personnel? I've got a team standing by. Rich is already working on the financial tracking, and Saul's contacts in Atlanta can provide local support. Marcus nodded, already planning the operation. Destroying the Jefferson High network had been personal. But the work continued because there were always more predators, more victims, and more people who thought they could operate beyond the reach of justice. What's the timeline? 2 weeks to establish cover identities. The target company is hiring for several positions that would give us inside access. Do it. After Danny left, Marcus returned to the one part of his new life that remained complicated. On his desk was a letter from Kendra, forwarded through federal witness protection. She was living somewhere in the Pacific Northwest under a new identity, working as a bank teller in a small town where no one knew her history. The letter was the 15th she'd sent. Like the others, it contained apologies, explanations, and requests for forgiveness that Marcus would never grant. He dropped it in the shredder without reading beyond the first paragraph. Some betrayals created wounds that never healed. Better to amputate cleanly than to let infection spread. His phone buzzed with a text from Phyllis. Dad, got accepted to Georgetown. Full scholarship to study international relations. Want to follow in your footsteps? Marcus smiled, the first genuine expression of happiness he'd felt in months. His daughter had not only survived her mother's betrayal, but had emerged stronger and more determined. The FBI's interview process had revealed her to be exceptionally gifted at intelligence analysis, and Agent Schaefer had personally recommended her for accelerated college programs. He texted back, "Proud of you. Dinner tonight to celebrate." "Absolutely. But I choose the restaurant this time. No more diners that serve questionable coffee." At 18, Phyllis had developed her father's operational instincts and her own strong sense of justice. She knew exactly what Marcus did for a living now, the real version, not the cover stories, and had expressed interest in joining Phantom Investigations after college. The idea both terrified and thrilled him. Training the next generation of operators meant passing on skills that could save lives or destroy them, depending on how they were used. But if anyone could handle that responsibility, it was his daughter. That evening, over dinner at the expensive restaurant Phyllis had chosen, they discussed her college plans and future career options. She was excited about studying international relations, but equally interested in the operational aspects of intelligence work. "Dad, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever regret what happened to Mom?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I regret that she made choices that put you in danger. I regret that our family was destroyed by her betrayal. But I don't regret the consequences she faced, even though she's alive and trying to make amends." "Phyllis, your mother helped plan your abduction and sale to human traffickers. Some actions can't be forgiven, even by family." "I know. I just wonder sometimes if there might have been another way." "There might have been, but that would have required your mother to make different choices, and she didn't." Phyllis nodded, understanding the finality in his voice. "What about you? Are you happy with the way things turned out?" Marcus looked at his daughter, intelligent, strong, and determined to make the world safer for other people. "I'm happy that you're alive and safe. Everything else is just details. Even the fact that you're now running one of the most successful private intelligence firms in the country. Even that." They finished dinner in comfortable silence, both understanding that some conversations marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Phyllis was no longer the innocent teenager who'd trusted her teachers and step-grandfather. Marcus was no longer the undercover operative pretending to be something he wasn't. They were father and daughter, partners in a mission that extended far beyond their personal trauma. The work would continue because it had to continue. Somewhere, other children were being targeted by other networks. Other families were being torn apart by betrayal and predation. And when those cases reached the attention of Phantom Investigations, Marcus and his team would be ready. As they left the restaurant, Phyllis asked one final question. "Dad, do you think Mom ever really loved us?" Marcus stopped walking and looked at his daughter directly. "I think your mother loved the idea of us. But when that came into conflict with what she wanted for herself, she chose herself. And you? Do you think you'll ever trust anyone that way again?" "I trust you. And I trust my team. That's enough." They walked to their car in the cool spring evening, both understanding that they'd crossed a threshold they could never uncross. The past was gone, buried under the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. The future was theirs to build, one operation at a time. Marcus's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Danny. "Atlanta case just got more interesting. The target company has contracts with 12 school districts. Looks like Sheridan's using corporate training programs to access children." He showed the message to Phyllis, who read it with the same cold fury that Marcus felt building in his chest. "When do we leave for Atlanta?" she asked. I'm 18 now. I can make my own decisions about how to spend my summer vacation." Marcus studied his daughter's face and saw his own determination reflected back at him. She was ready to begin her real education, not in college classrooms, but in the field where predators learned that some people fought back with lethal efficiency. 2 weeks, he said finally. "But you follow orders without question, and you remember that this isn't a game." "Understood." As they drove home through the quiet suburban streets, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the peace of resolved trauma, but the peace of knowing exactly what came next. The hunt would continue. Justice would be served. And the people who thought they could harm innocent children would discover that some mistakes were permanent. In his rearview mirror, Marcus could see the lights of the city where he'd built his new life from the ashes of his old one. Ahead lay the darkness of the highway, leading toward whatever battles waited in Atlanta and beyond. He was Marcus May, protector of the innocent, destroyer of predators, and father to a daughter who would carry on the work when he was gone. Some janitors cleaned up spills and emptied trash cans. Others cleaned up the kind of messes that left permanent stains on the world. Marcus preferred the second kind of cleaning. It paid better, and the results lasted longer. Most importantly, it kept his daughter safe. And in the end, that was all that mattered. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.